May I speak in the name of the one holy and living God. This morning, I want to propose what might be a controversial claim, I'm not sure. And that claim is this: it is impossible to say yes to God, to the call of God through the person of Jesus, to discipleship. Now, this isn't to say that we cannot literally say yes. Of course we can. Rather, it is to say that when we say yes, we can never be sure of what that yes will fully entail. It is a proper risk, a leap of faith. It is to speak affirmatively from a place within ourselves that seeks the highest good without knowing precisely where that desire will lead us, without knowing even precisely how we will garner the strength, the courage, the vision to approach and realize that good. Saying yes to God, to God's call to us through the person of Jesus, depends in large part on who, on what we believe God is to and for us. Every now and then I like to ask friends or even strangers with whom I've developed a fast rapport, do you believe in God? And the answers range from no to sure, to yes, but something like the universe. And almost without fail, after some further debate and discussion, those who respond in this final way, yes, but something like the universe, without fail, they seem to wind up asking a version of this question. Well, aren't we God? It is a question that suggests something with which I disagree fundamentally, but also with which I am sympathetic. Suggested in the question, well, aren't we God, is a desire, I suspect, to imagine oneself, to affirm oneself in the face of historical narratives of racialized, gendered, and sexualized wretchedness as the beloved of God. There is a desire here, I think, to swing the pendulum from a universe in which one is seen as the furthest from God to a universe in which not only is one closer to God, but one is God. Now, whether this sort of response is purely logical or purely rhetorical, whether this response is seen as the opposite and equal response that exposes a former narrative as obviously violent and untrue, that God is further from the savage, from the native, from the black, from the woman, from the queer, or whether it is a way of speaking, an exaggerative figure of speech that reaches into the deepest places of religious trauma and pulls one into a new plane of perception. Whether it's logical or rhetorical, I cannot be sure. But as we can see from our gospel reading this morning, in the request of James and John to sit at the right and left hand of Jesus in his glory, the desire of enfleshed creatures to claim some kind of equality with God, whether logical or rhetorical, whether maniacal or innocent, is not a new desire. It is not a new presumptuousness. The theologian and Yale professor Catherine Tanner makes this strikingly clear claim about such questions. There is nothing in between God and creatures. No ontological continuum spanning the difference between them, despite what the idea of one creature better imaging God than another might suggest. And therefore, there can be no real approximation to the divine on any creature's part. Let's break that down. When Tanner says that there is nothing between God and creatures, no ontological continuum spanning the difference between them, this is another way of saying that there is a 0 degree of difference between the being of God and the being of creatures. A 0 degree of difference, which is striking because there are degrees of difference within even a single creature. For example, think about yourself 5, 10, 15 years ago. Okay? Chances are that you, as you sit here today, are recognizably different from yourself 5, 10, 15 years ago. Better still, I'm sure a number of us can make a list of things that we want to be, but are not yet. Who we are, who we were, who we want to be, these all constitute some degree of difference within the consciousness of even a single being, of even a single creature. But this is not so as it pertains to God's being, and this is not so as it pertains to God's being with reference to our being. God's being, to which we are joined by a 0 degree of difference, is the same yesterday, is the same today, and will be the same tomorrow. There is no better than the best. There is no want in God. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not. Thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. And this kind of unspeakable, unimaginable, imperceptible closeness between God's Spirit and our spirit, this incomprehensibility, this incomprehensibly divine image of companionship demands that our speech about God account for that which the human mind cannot grasp in its fullness. This is a 0 degree of difference, not simply a 0 degree. A 0 degree of difference, a paradox. Indeed, thankfully, there are times wherein that 0 degree of difference evaporates. In fleeting moments of ecstasy, wherein we feel the presence of God without boundary, without border, without restraint. Perhaps you have experienced such in the face of an incomparable sunset, or a blackened sky which gives to the stars their brilliance. Perhaps it was the tender embrace of one's beloved, or in a moment of contemplation and prayer. Perhaps when standing before a work of art, or standing even before yourself. But the sun was not God, and the stars were not God, and your beloved was not God, and your prayer closet was not God, and you were not God. But it was by the grace of God that you were bound to a beauty that transcended you. When James and John tell Jesus, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory," it is likely that they are responding to the grace-filled, ecstatic experience of Jesus that they encountered in the Transfiguration, whereby with Peter they witnessed Elijah and Moses appear with Jesus, and God the Father spoke from a cloud saying, "This is my Son, the beloved, listen to him." From a seemingly privileged, fleeting moment wherein the 0 degree of difference between God's Spirit and their spirit evaporated, James and John were transfixed. They wanted more. For themselves, they wanted to remain at the pinnacle of the mountain, at the height of religious experience, in the seemingly exclusive place of glory. So Jesus asks them, "Okay, are you able to drink of the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they respond, "We are able." They say yes. And yet, they are saying yes, it seems, within the exclusive domain of their own selfish intentions to be equal to God. They desire the fullness of God's presence, to possess it for themselves. But Jesus is clear. Whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. So, to say yes to God is to say yes to an intensity of service, to come down from the safety of the pinnacle of the mountain, to enter into the rabble of the crowd, to enter into the fray, to offer, as the Son of Man himself offered, one's life to another, to transcend the self by being in relationship in ways that confers to another a sense of their own transcendence. We don't get it by hiding or by merely affirming our greatness, our capacity to stand before God. No. The glory, the ecstasy of God comes in our capacity to say yes to another, not even knowing precisely how much of ourselves we'll have to give, how much of our stuff we'll have to give, how much of our ambition we'll have to give up. We say yes in faith, not because we can. We say yes knowing that the grace of God will carry us into the possibility of transcendence that transforms the lives of so many, including our own. We say to the call to discipleship, the impossible, yes.